And you need to differentiate very clearly what is DevOps and what is platform engineering, that it uses the same methods, but it's not the same thing.
Why?
Infinitely. Well, I mean, DevOps itself, from the original thoughts and ideas around it, is like you should reduce the bottlenecks, making it more accessible, making your tools more accessible for everyone. That you need teams that can solve all kind of problems, but also what then later comes into is this: you build it, you run it, which I think is the most horrible sentence ever said in the IT, because I have never met a developer who love to carry around his notebook on a Saturday evening at 3 a.m. in the morning while being in a club.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Alexa Griffith, and today we're diving deep into the intersection of platform engineering, cloud journeys, IT sustainability, and the ever-present buzz around AI. Joining us is Max Körbächer, sorry if I said that wrong, a thought leader who wears many hats, like platform architect, founder and managing director of Liquid Reply, Cloud Native Computing Foundation's emeritus, lead technical advisory group for environmental sustainability, advisory board member of the Linux Foundation, and author of Platform Engineering for Architects. He's here to share insights on platform engineering, what makes cloud journeys fail, how sustainability and tech go hand in hand, and much more. So let's get started. Max, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So let's start with, can you tell me about your journey in tech?
For sure. Well, originally I wasn't meant to join tech. So I wasn't the best born in school, so I had to change school once, and I actually applied for doing some arts stuff. But unfortunately, it looks like I'm better in IT than in arts. So I end up in a special track in the school system for doing IT already very, very early on. And then I did a kind of dual study, which is in Germany like a special way where you like goes 3 months work and then 3 months study. And then it's goes back and forth, and you have a very short time frame where you have to finish your studies, your bachelor degree in this case. And that was very helpful because it was very practical oriented. So not just like learning some theory or maybe have a class where you install something, but it was really like the first 3 months is you went like to an operations center and talk with the people who like really operate the global grid and data network. And then the next time you go into an architecture area. And so it was very interesting, and it helped to figure out what you like, what you don't like, in a very short amount of time. And then from there, I got a job offer in the same company, and entered an area where I was supposed to set up projects, collecting demands and set up projects. But I very fast moved over to enterprise architecture. So way broader view, and then you start being responsible for 10, 20 applications, getting more and more. And then at some point in time, I very fast flipped a little bit through. I went to IT management consulting for 1 year, doing enterprise architecture management on a CIO level. Wasn't really mine. Too much PowerPoint, too much talking about things rather than doing things. So I switched again and joined the CIO office of Germany's biggest TV broadcaster at this point in time, and worked in the enterprise architecture management and changed a lot of stuff there. And ultimately, in the end, we had a very cool challenge set up by our CIO, which I'm very grateful today for. Is like we had the chance to raise vanilla Kubernetes setup on premise versus an OpenShift setup on premise. And so I was on the OpenShift team. We won, but I think the Kubernetes is still running today and OpenShift is not. Nevertheless, that brought me to all this cloud native Kubernetes thing. And then I got hired by a consulting company called Reply for actually building a team around Kubernetes, growing the team, growing the customer, and so on and so forth. And then, yeah, after 2 years, I proposed to say like, hey, let's make an own sub company out of that, little branch that focused purely on Kubernetes, cloud native, platform engineering, open source consulting, to get a little bit out of the more pure cloud focused perspective and turn it more to like having a look into this end-to-end responsibilities for supporting developers, supporting the operations people, and build this unified layer in it.
Oh, amazing. Can you tell me a little bit more about that OpenShift Kubernetes project that you worked on? How did that work?
It was actually very fantastic because we really had a target in the end that we want to really also change the approach how we do software, and we wanted to break down the monolith software, which is like really on the core of the business at this point in time. So we really needed a platform for it. And yeah, the idea really was like to have two separated teams. One start from scratch, building Kubernetes, working with a storage provider together. At this point in time, there doesn't exist anything like a really good storage CSI driver or something like that. So they had to hack around a lot to make it work. And that's why they also need a longer time to set up things. While I had the luck to rely on Red Hat products and get the Red Hat engineers on board. So the setup of the platform was very fast and smooth, like 1-2 weeks and everything was up and running. And also later on the project management for migrating the first applications to microservices and so on was kind of fast, almost like boring, I would say, even though it was an exciting new technology, right? I've never heard before about container Kubernetes whatsoever. I had like no idea what it is, but it really make fun. That's like, yeah, we had a small team. We made continuously progress. We worked at this point in time with the Kafka people together for containerizing Kafka, which was also very interesting and demanding procedure to get the things up and running somehow. And yeah, it was a lot of hack around, I would say. It's because there was really a lot of stuff just missing or in the baby shoes in some way, not really well integrated, not very well running, and so on. So it was yeah, a very fun time.
I mean, it sounds, and for those who don't know, OpenShift is Red Hat's version of Kubernetes, correct?
Yeah, exactly. This point in time, it just migrated to use Kubernetes. Before, it has its own way of orchestrating container. And then when we started using it, it just freshly migrated to use Kubernetes as the under the hood.
Okay, great. So you mentioned, or speaking of Kubernetes, you have been involved in a couple different ways with the Linux Foundation. For the listeners, can you explain what is the Linux Foundation and what is each of the roles that you've had? What do those mean? What do they do?
Sure. So surprisingly, as the name suggested, the Linux Foundation has something to do with the operating system, Linux. So they, as a foundation, take care about the maintenance of the kernel, the continuous development, integration of new features, and so on. But also keep it open source so that it's not falling into any kind of enterprise commercial agreements. And the Linux Foundation actually has, within the Linux Foundation, a lot of sub-projects which are not purely focused on Linux itself. It's tons of other open source projects. And then they have other open source foundation also under the Linux Foundation, which is, for me, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation that takes care about the whole Kubernetes ecosystem with all the different open source tools around it. And also there to ensure that Kubernetes and everything what's needed for it stays open source and for everyone free and available. So actually where I started, my journey in the whole community thing really started in the Kubernetes release team, where I helped for almost 3 years in different roles, from communication part. I think that was Kubernetes 1.17, the chill chinchilla or something like this, or chill capybara or something like that. I do not remember. It's some time ago. Then I had different other roles like CI Signal, which is about the integration and see if all tests are good and so on. And yeah, from there, at some point, because I'm organizing also Kubernetes meetups in Munich and other locations, and then I also started with the KCD Munich, also organized the KCD Ukraine as a fundraiser project for setting up this conference. Eventually, I became a CNCF ambassador. So the CNCF Ambassador program is for supporting people that try to bring to the world the CNCF ecosystem, the open source tools, right? It's like talking about the Kubernetes and the Kubernetes tools around it. And that can be done in different ways. You can either really contribute and code for the products, but I'm very bad in coding. Maybe because I learned in school to write Java on a piece of paper, and that's why I start hating it for some reason. And it can go into all, yeah, and it can go in a different direction, like creating video content, creating blog posts, host a podcast, for example, but also organizing events, which is for me my pure joy for being part of the CNCF Ambassador program. Yeah, beside that, I'm also part of the Linux Foundation Europe Advisory Board. So there's a Linux Foundation which is originated in US. And usually open source doesn't know so much about borders, but there's a lot of fundings and funding projects going on in Europe, but they all require that your organization is legally located also in Europe. And that's what the Linux Foundation Europe is doing. And they have searched for a fairly large advisory board from all different kind of tech backgrounds, help them steering to the one or other direction of the Linux Foundation. And so there we take a look, what is the recent hot topics, like there. Europe likes to create different kind of rule sets in some ways. And some of them are good. Some of them are slightly critical. There were some around the open source and how we can use it in Europe, for example. It was very close to practically forbid to professionally use open source, which was like very surprisingly critical and questionable. But there are also good other stuff, like thinking about AI ethics and how to ensure that AIs are not doing stupid things in the background.
You mentioned KCD, something that you're helping to put on an event. What is that?
Yeah. So originally KCD was the Kubernetes Community Days. At some point in time, we reduced the name to KCD only, exclusively. It's like a mini KubeCon. It's like usually like a 1 day, sometimes 2 day events that are focusing on a regional conference event happening, however you want to call it. They are very much different. Like in Europe, almost every country has its own KCD. And so they're a good option to go to if you cannot afford like to fly over to US or fly across half of the globe to go to Europe to one of the big KubeCons.
Yeah.
And the great thing is that they're often supported by a lot of the CNCF ambassadors. So from a speaker perspective, you still can go and listen to very good, very big conference-like talks, but you also can afterwards really have a good connection with the people, drink in the evening with them a wine or a beer or water, which is really fantastic because it's like more smaller, more networking-like.
Yeah.
And usually on a place where, just all the people stay together and you can mix and mingle all the time.
Yeah, it seems like a big effort. And you're right, it's great to be able to see and connect with people in person, especially in a city like Munich. I mean, I want to go too. It sounds so fun. Yeah, I'm sure that's a big organizational effort for you as well, hosting something like this.
Yeah, the good thing is we have a team. We have a team around it, which now is like in the we hosted the 3rd year, but the team, how it is going to organize the 4th time, but the 3rd year in a row together. So, and so it's like, you have a good understanding, a good communication. Everyone knows what needs to be done, and then it becomes easier over time.
So one of your other roles in CNCF has to do with environmental sustainability. Can you tell me a little bit about what that role means for tech and code?
Almost 3 years ago, we came to the idea to bring environmental sustainability also to open source. In the end, more like a research, thinking about like, hey, what can we do with open source, with the open source community to ensure that the software pieces which we put out there are more efficient? or maybe that we give reference architectures which are more efficient. And so we proposed that. We started as a working group. Eventually, we became directly a technical advisory group within the CNCF, because actually there was some misalignment and working groups didn't exist on that level as we wanted to be. So directly got the tech. And yeah, within this group, we organized different activities. It starts from like providing knowledge to people just about like, hey, what does it mean if we talk about environmental sustainability? Why IT matters. So IT, for example, has the same amount of CO2 footprint equivalent like the whole aviation industry or like the whole construction industry. So they, yeah, have all three together need around or produce around 12% of the global CO2 footprint, which is insane. Or another way around, you could, for example, shut down complete Italy and Austria and Switzerland, and it would have the same effect like shutting down the complete IT worldwide. So it's very, very huge amount of energy which is used for computation. And so within the group, we then come to ideas like, okay, let's measure, for example, open source projects and give the different open source projects an overview how much energy they use per release. So if they can optimize for the power consumption, then they will get better over time. And maybe, yeah, can use a multiplication factor here for, like similar to like when you open, for example, Java and you see like, oh, it's 1 billion user on the planet using Java. You have the similar thing with proxies like Nginx or so. It's also like 1 billion time downloaded and running however hundred of millions of times or more. So the idea was like, okay, just make everything just a little bit better. And then we have done already way more than individual people could do, or running around in the park and collecting trash. It's a nice activity, but if you put this multiplication factor out to the world, it's way more effective. Also, we maybe don't see it in single instances so much.
What are some low-hanging fruit for people trying to be more sustainable in their organizations?
Platform is one of the things. So either to go to way more efficient data center or to way more efficient hoster or hosting provider is one of the things. In Europe, they have such a huge difference between the countries that if you go from Germany, for example, to Norway, you will reduce your CO2 footprint by 95%. Now, that's not always the best thing to do, right? Because like you increase the latency or you have to shift tons of data. So it's not always the best approach of doing it. But just being more conscious about choosing where you're going to host your application and so on is already very, very good and effective starting point.
How does this affect the bottom line? Is it generally that doing something more efficient costs more or less money?
In theory, if you reduce your costs and make something more efficient, theoretically you also should improve your CO2 footprint, but it doesn't have to. So especially in a cloud provider, you can see that the carbon footprint correlates with the price, but not always. So if you go, for example, to Ireland, doesn't matter which cloud provider, it's the cheapest area which you can go to sometimes, but the CO2 footprint is not good because they have to buy a lot of other energy and so on and so forth. So if you follow like the price tag, it's helpful. It's a good starting point because you don't need to think about power consumption and you will improve already. But if you want to do it right, it's really more an engineering challenge, I would say. And this is also what we see in the group of the technical advisory group, that people are fascinated about the engineering complexity behind it because it's not static; it's moving. If the sun shines or you have a little bit more storm, then you directly have more renewable energy available. And then it changed already all parameters like, oh, now, I don't know, you can go to Germany, suddenly the energy is good, and so on. So yeah, like therefore, the replatforming is like the most efficient thing which you can do. And then the other thing, and that's why we also look into it from a Kubernetes perspective, is like really to increase the density on nodes. There's something called the energy proportionality. That means that if you just start a server, for example, will use 50% of, or it needs to use like 150 watts per hour, it just uses 50% of the CPU. And then if it's increased the CPU, it doesn't need more energy for that, or not that much more energy. But the problem is, if you think about the engineering in traditional hosting, but still also in cloud provider, most of the time you engineer it that way that you have a lot of headspace, so that your application can grow in its consumption whatsoever. That's very harmful for the planet, because your server starts performing very well if you go to like 95% of resource consumption. And that's where Kubernetes is very helpful for, because it can help to fill up all the space with containers, which are way smaller in the consumption. Maybe you put on top of that a function as a service. So you could put very tiny container and fill up the gaps. But if you need space, then you can very fast also distribute the workload away and give space to application which may be suddenly needed. So that's also a very efficient approach to do so.
Yeah, definitely a complex problem. Is this something that you at your company advise people on as well?
Also, yeah, it's part of it. We always try to not directly put it at the big selling label on top of it, but more like saying, hey, this is our best practice. This is where our values lay on, and we do that automatically, or we advise you to do X, Y, Z. It will improve your performance. It will make your architecture more lightweight. You will reduce your costs, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, tell me more about your company. You founded this company, right? What is it like being a founder? What does your company do? All
Yeah,
that.
sure. So with my company, it's a very specific one, because I founded it in a consulting network. So I do not really own it, but I'm responsible for it. I've done the classical pitch deck, going and say like, hey, this is our business plan. That's the market. How does it look like? That's our growth plan. And from there, we got the chance to really get started. So we have a corporate in the background that takes away all the, yeah, I would say things which really annoys you, like tax office, closing every month, making contracts, stuff like that. So you can really focus more on the business side, working with the customer, find the technical solutions, and yeah, that helps to be a little bit faster, a little bit more customer oriented, because we really not get bothered by all this typical business processes around it that usually takes away a lot of your capacity and brain capacity. And yeah, as said, we founded Liquid Reply as the Kubernetes consulting company and open source. But we very fast found out that, especially like 4 years ago, people, when they hear Kubernetes, they think like, oh, it's complex, it's expensive. And still so today. When they hear we do Kubernetes, they're like, we don't need it. It's so complex. It's super expensive. We need a huge team for operating it, and so on. And so that's why we transforming a little bit away and come more with like, hey, we do platform engineering. We help you to build a whole ecosystem, an end-to-end perspective on your IT infrastructure, helping you to actually forget more about the infrastructure itself and focus more on developing something that really brings you value. And the rest we get somehow away. And that works quite well. The key issue which we always find is that companies even struggle adopting cloud, and they struggle already on their cloud journey. And then for sure, if I'm coming around and say like, hey, look, there's containers, there's Kubernetes, I don't know, what else do we have? Overlay network, service meshes, blah, blah, blah. They will get nuts. There's like, what the heck is going on? It's too complicated. I just want to run my web application. And most of the time they're right. You don't need a Kubernetes to run a web application. But as I also know from my background as an enterprise architect, even medium-sized companies have hundreds of applications and they need to run somewhere. And I believe for the most cases, there is no more efficient way nowadays than to either go on a Kubernetes-based platform, which is very well engineered, but maybe you don't have the right people to do that, or you go serverless. But serverless is not an option for the most companies that have an existing IT infrastructure. That's something for startups or companies who can really freshly start from greenfield approach.
Yeah, are you telling them how they should build it, or are you also building it for them?
Both ways. You have companies who really love to get your advice, your direction, the amount of experience from your team who have seen different environments, different industries, how they're doing it. But you also have customers who really just like put it there, make it run, and I will do the rest. So it very much depends on, but we have the whole spectrum for that.
Must be fun to always be working on different projects. What kind of companies generally are coming to you?
At the moment, we actually just work with enterprises. So the, I don't know, top 30, top 40 largest companies, which you can find in Germany, for example. Also, we try to find more direction also to the hidden champions. So smaller companies, but they are globally leader in their industry. We have found in the past very, very interesting that they are, yeah, living somewhere in the background, but doing still very fantastic jobs.
That's so neat. So I guess this is how you came to write a book on platform engineering. Can you tell me a little bit more about that book?
Yeah, well, the idea of the book is actually quite old. When in the beginning of the year I came back to it, I found some documents from, I think, in the mid of 2021, where I tried to formulate my first thoughts about like how to write a book on platform engineering. And I had a lot of question marks for certain areas because they were not really fulfilled or there was no answer so far given. And so in the beginning of the year, I was like, either I write it now or we'll never write something. And I started brainstorming around it and very fast found out, okay, I have two problems. First thing, the industry and the tools are moving too fast. So if you start right now, until the book is done, the most tools you want to reference are updated like at least twice, maybe three times. So you would need to rework the book anyhow continuously, which I found a little bit ridiculous. And the other thing is like, I have this very broad consulting perspective from different industry and different standards from different approaches and have this broad perspective, but I would like to bring in also like two other perspectives. I don't do operations, right? I do not have a team which does operations. So I need someone from that perspective. And also we do a lot of observability and automation. I wanted some more opinionated perspective in this one too, because platform engineering is very much about automation and process design and get all those things somehow work together. And so I found my two co-authors, Andy Grabner from Dynatrace, and he recommended me then also to Hilary Lipsig from Red Hat. Andy is like the DevRel advocate for everything around observability, automation. He's part of the Captain team. Captain is an open source project for meanwhile, it has changed, but it looks into SLOs and DORA metrics for developers. And Hillary comes from a site reliability engineering background, operating OpenShift on cloud provider as a managed service, and think a lot about like the technical depths and security concerns and stuff like that. And so that's how the team comes together, and we start writing the book with a focus on actually everything that is not hard coded, I would say. That's why the title Platform Engineering for Architects, because I want to be able to take the book in 2 years out of the shelf and read it, and still it's okay and right. It's not outdated. So we write a lot about the concept, the idea of platform engineering, the mindset that you have to change to this product mindset, not like a project mindset, because like I always like to say is if you do a project, the project has a deadline, and if it hits this deadline, then it's literally dead. Resources go away, and it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Time, money, people, everything goes away when a project hits a deadline. In a product, it's different. The product needs to find its own way of surviving and being sustainable for itself. And then, we look around all the processes as an architect, decision processes, how to deal with technical debts, how you come to certain decisions, how you come around certain discussions. So when we talk about Kubernetes and container, we very often face the discussion like, hey, we need to isolate that stuff. It must run on a virtual machine. And then you talk with someone else and they're like, why we need to make a virtual machine before we put a mini virtual machine on top of that? And it's like, yeah, well, someone has a requirement. So we try to come around such things. And then, yeah, we break it also down to other perspective, like cost management. Sustainability is a little part in it. What are like the 5 things you can do to make your platform automatically a little bit more sustainable, or supporting different architectures and so on. So yeah, it's like try to crack everything what is technically, but what has nothing to do with the technical implementation.
So for a platform to be treated as a product instead of a project, it needs to have some long-term goals about some sustainability for the product itself.
Mhm.
Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense. What are some ways to, or the main ways to really think about it as a product? Like if you're an engineer building a platform right now, what are some main things you need to do in order to treat it as a product instead of a project?
It's difficult because it very much depends on the different organizations. Ideally, you can find yourself in an environment where the organization has understand that a platform is a valuable foundation that will run all your development, that will run all your operations, all your specialized teams will utilize it, will integrate with it, and so on, and that you have found this single layer of trust in some way. But it very much depends on the platform engineering team itself, because they need to prove their value towards the end user on the one hand side, and also needs to prove their value towards the company on the other side. And that's usually the most difficult part, because normally what makes your developer happy doesn't make your organization happy, and vice versa. So this is like the challenge as a product, somewhere in between, to find the right way to do that, I would say. And yeah, in the end, we also wrote about it. You need different components from it. You need the management support and need to convince that they will spend some time, money, and effort for it, but also that they will not going to kill it immediately, because the results are something which comes sooner or later, or sometimes never. But well, that's the thing about the product. And then you need to define some KPIs, like how do you set up for yourself that a platform is already a successful product. And for some organizations, we can really talk about money, like we can, I don't know, merge way faster features. We are faster in delivering some features to the market and so on, or we are more reliable. But we also have seen companies which are happy that their IT has started changing their mindset and be more collaborative, be more engaged. The code quality and the documentation quality has increased and stuff like this. So it can very much vary on this side. And then, yeah, you need always a little bit the buy-in from the developers and the operations people. That they are open to work with the platform, that they want to contribute maybe back, that they have their own ideas, their own wish to bring some feedback towards the platform engineering team. And then in the end, you need also one very specific role, which is about developer experience or developer relations. That's what the most organizations really lack of, is like having 1 or 2 people running around and just care about that those who are writing code or those who are running the servers are happy with the environment they are working in, and that it works for their demand and not working for someone else's demand whom they have never met.
Yeah, a few things you said definitely resonate with me as a platform engineer. So I'm building a platform part of my time and my job as well. One is getting people to understand your value, because let's say AI models couldn't run unless they have an AI platform. But how do you say that? How do you calculate that value when you can say a model is bringing in, generating X amount of money, but the model couldn't run without you as well? So I think that's one very difficult thing, that you don't have that very end user experience when your users are internal users as well. And with that, also as engineers, we tend to always think that we know what we should build sometimes. So we're building a platform thinking this is what they need. But you're right, having component, which I think is missing in a lot of places and a little bit difficult to have, that makes sure that you're building something that's useful to the people using it, even though those are also engineers, is another problem too. So yeah, what you said, it definitely resonates a bit with me as well as a platform engineer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's really about put your own ego back and like, yes, there's a lot of cool, fancy technology which you maybe would like to integrate. Maybe you should get first some feedback if it solves the actual problem or not.
Yeah, definitely a good thing to do. So how has your view on platform engineering changed since you wrote the book?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think I have realized that we need more kind of change management and almost like a management consulting thingy. Also, again, I don't like too much PowerPoint stuff, but you really need to convince on different level people for, hey, that's a good thing. And here's like the 5 top reason why. Um, my team is very techy, really, really crazy good engineers, but this lacks then in the end that you cannot really communicate business value. And I think that's like the biggest learning for me is like we need to understand how to communicate the business value of a platform so that you get all the support that you need for that. And you need to differentiate very clearly what is DevOps and what is platform engineering, that it uses the same methods, but it's not the same thing. And
And why?
infinitely, well, I mean, DevOps itself from the original thoughts and ideas around it is like you should reduce the bottlenecks, making it more accessible, making your tools more accessible for everyone. That you need teams that can solve all kind of problems, but also what then later comes into is this: you build it, you run it, which I think is the most horrible sentence ever said in the IT, because I have never met a developer who love to carry around his notebook on a Saturday evening at 3 a.m. in the morning while being in a club and going to fix some software. That's not going to happen. And no one is going to do that for a few additional euros or dollars or whatsoever. But you will also never find maybe an sys administrator that loves to, I don't know, start writing front end applications in TypeScript whatsoever. So this perspective is like, maybe it's too drastic, and a lot of people will say like, that's not what it's meant by that. But this is how a lot of enterprises really, really understand it. Someone who can do both and do the operations all day long, difficult. So on the platform engineering team, a platform engineering team should not try to be solving everything. A platform engineering team should educate and should provide a very open environment for specialized teams to integrate with the platform engineering team, providing the services. But not that the platform engineering team has to solve all of these services. I always like to give the image: a DevOps team is like a silo, it's siloed. A platform engineering team is like throwing the silo on the side and it's open on both sides. You can enter, can go through it, you can experience it. Yeah, that's like the more or less rough picture around it.
That makes sense. So as you're helping people build different platforms, I'm sure you're also helping people now. It's very popular for these cloud migrations. Do you have a lot of experience in cloud migrations?
That's unfortunately is the primary part of our work most of the time, I would say. So building the platform is the fast and easy one. Doing the migration is the longer couple of years story, which we usually follow up. And we do that on all kind of different cloud providers, sometimes in hybrid environments. Sometimes we even define cloud exit strategies and think about how to revert a cloud migration for regulated environments, for example.
That's interesting work. Can you share a little bit about why people are deciding to do this now and what are some issues that they're having?
So there are very poor data protection, for example, in US, and which collides with the data protection requirements in Europe. And there were like, I think they're now in the third version of try to solve that somehow. And every time it got, in the end, canceled. So none of the contracts which were negotiated between US and Europe were really valid. And that causes for insurances, health, life science, research institutes, whatsoever, a huge problem because they cannot effectively protect their intellectual property. And so they need always to be able to answer, like, what is the approach to go within, let's say, 1 year, 2 years out of the cloud, which you're currently hosting? And that's a not so easy to answer question too. Luckily, for some approaches, Kubernetes can be a foundation for that, which makes the migration path shorter. But it's not also the perfect answer because, again, not everything can go either to the cloud in an easy way, but also many stuff cannot just be demigrated in a very easy and fast way from a cloud provider. Often also because of tons of data needs to be shifted around, and usually it's so much data that even the biggest wires are not big enough to get it out of cloud provider without paying an additional X amount of millions of euros for it.
Sounds like a challenge a lot of people are definitely working on. Another thing that's probably popular is AI. I mean, everyone wants to use AI now for various things, and people are coming to you again to build platforms. So do you see people a lot asking for AI and maybe places that aren't as useful?
Absolutely. So we see the very big shift from spending money on going to the cloud to spending money on going to the cloud for AI. This is now the new key selling point why companies would like to go to the cloud most of the time. Also, what we have experienced is that companies are searching for use cases, why AI is relevant or for what they can use it. But very few are really looking into which problem they can solve with it. So we see, because of that, a lot of projects are failing. And luckily, with platform engineering, you're more in the infrastructure part. So for you, it's more like, okay, the application doesn't run, who cares? And you just decrease the size of the clusters, for example, and everything is cool. But from the application or end user perspective, it's a lot of challenges because they want to try things out and then spin up their own models. And from an engineering perspective, it's interesting to run on different CPU architectures and integrate GPU or TPUs and stuff like that, or optimize for the different performance, optimize for batch workloads, stuff like that. But also on the other hand side, it's not that crazily different to what you have done before. So it's just yet another hardware sometimes. So I would say in a platform engineering perspective, the all AI hype is sometimes a little bit annoying because, like, yeah, come on, just do it. But we also have to face the reality that it's at the moment the driver for going to the cloud, but also for very purposefully developed platforms hosting different kind of AIs, from training models to fine-tuning and provide racks to serving with inferences in the application. And I think there's the value of the platform to be able to actually provide, again, like an end-to-end environment for all kind of people, from data scientists to end users. One platform where they can run the whole chain of it and optimize the usage of the very expensive resources under it too.
Wow, that's fun for your engineers, I bet. So as you have a company, a consulting company, I'm sure you're hiring a lot of also new grads. Do you have any thoughts on this incoming class of engineers and how maybe it differs from the others?
Yeah. Another very difficult question. Yeah. So what are the key difference? For some part, I mean, on the one hand side, in the market, the demand on IT people are increasingly high. Doesn't matter that there are tons of layoffs happening, but usually the big tech companies recover within 1 year the amount of people they have laid off and bring all the people back in. And that happens throughout the whole industry. And so even all the young people coming to the market, they are not enough. Still need more on that. But also the perspective on the technologies has changed a lot. in some way. So the demand for the job is very high. What is expected to deliver as an employer, what to give as an employer, in all kinds of regards, like from most expensive hardware to extremely cool offices to maybe a project is not the best one and it has a lot of annoying tasks. I want to get out of that. To like, I don't know, going to conferences and get the question like, is this not working hours? I was like, yes and no. I mean, like, you learn something and it's cool. And in the evening you go and drink a beer, so maybe that's not, and so on. And so yeah, it has changed a little bit in that perspective. And also talking with different other leads from different other companies. At the moment, a lot of leaders struggle with this Gen Z generation because there's no good approach, or we cannot find a very good approach to find the right reasoning behind why you do something in some way, and you maybe have totally different expectations. I mean, for us, even as a consulting company, we do not expect that we work more than the contractual set working hours. While there are for sure other consulting companies, especially in management consultant, where it's like, if you do not double the amount of hours, you have not worked this week, which is insane. But also there, it's like somehow people are very fast tired of their job. So they want to reduce very early their working time because they cannot find enough time to manage their life in some way and things like that. And it's like, yeah, a lot of stuff has changed where you often question like, okay, but how have done the other 5 generations before? They also can manage that, you know. They have sometimes 3 kids and whatsoever and still are able to work their 40 hours and do this difficult project. And everything is good, everything is fine. So yeah, there's a lot of change in it.
Yeah, I think the generational cultural shift is interesting in how that bleeds over into the workplace, especially in something like tech where they've grown up with where tech is significantly improving and, people now have ChatGPT in high school, which makes it easier, quicker to find problems, which is great in some ways. And in other ways, maybe you don't have that resilience or the patience to have that resilience as much anymore. So I think it's very interesting how we will deal with the mesh of these cultures coming up. I guess there will be a solution. I just wonder what it will be.
Well, I mean, like, especially with the Gen AI, we're also looking into like how do you can use it in your work and in your paperwork, but also in your techie work. But for me, one thing is clear, like if you would abstract away all the simple tasks and maybe all the annoying tasks, then you do not have room anymore for learn actually all this groundwork which is needed. And I believe in the long run, this will be for all the young engineers become problematic because you cannot solve highly complex tasks if you do not understand the very fundamental, very bare IT thingy, how they are working.
Yeah.
I always need to think back when I did my bachelor studies. I was always annoyed why I have to learn like the foundations of IT, which was practically electronic engineering in some way. But then a few years ago, I was in a telecommunication project where we also implemented Kubernetes on Edge. And we had so much to do with real physical devices. And there it all comes together. Like you understand then how the different protocols works, why they do not integrate with Kubernetes, and how you can solve that one. And if I never would have taken a look into this engineering, electronical engineering part of like how computers and all that stuff would work, I would have way more problem to find a solution there, or to even to understand sometimes someone from a slightly different other market.
I agree. If you know how to use these tools really well, you can be very productive very, very quickly. But the second that the tool doesn't work, having that knowledge and that foundation is really helpful for understanding why it doesn't work and if it's wrong, identifying that as well. So that
Yeah.
definitely makes sense to me. That's all I have. Thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this. I always ask one last question. Do you have anything last thing that you want to say to the listeners and leave them with?
uh,
Advice.
Good advice. Hmm. yeah, platforms and platform engineering is for sure a very good foundation which we have right now. But it's not the end. Similar to Gen AI, it's just the start, just the beginning. If we don't keep learning and don't keep evolving and working on all these technical foundations and move them to the next layer, to the next level of evolution, it will happen with us or without us. So always keep on learning and keep on track with all the technical changes coming up.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Alexa's Input. Make sure to subscribe so you know when the next episode comes out. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Alexa's Input. Finally, any donations are welcome. You can go click the link in the description, go to the Anchor page, and I do take donations because I edit and record these podcasts on my own. So those are very much appreciated. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.